Li, the assistant prefectural magistrate of Guangxi province, was a very rich man. At home he had 7 concubines and his treasures were piled mountain high. But, when only 27 years old, he fell ill and died. Among his servants there was an elderly man who was always honest and loyal. He was extremely aggrieved by the premature death of his young master. Together with the 7 concubines, he performed a deist sacrificial ceremony. One day a deist priest came to beg for alms and the old servant scolded him, "Our master has just passed away, and we have no spare time to give you alms." The deist laughed and said, "So, do you too wish your master would come back to life? I can resort to magic arts and bring him back to life." Shocked by this news, the old servant rushed off to tell the concubines, who were all amazed by his powers and hurried out to pay their respects to the deist. But they could not find him, as he had disappeared. The old servant and the concubines all regretted that they had slighted the immortal and made him go away, so each one blamed the other. Not long afterwards, the old servant ran into the deist on his way to the market. Surprised and overjoyed, he grasped his hand, begging him to forgive him and come revive his master. The deist said, "I am not against your master coming back to life, but there is a rule in the underworld that a dead person can come back to life only if they are replaced by someone else. I am afraid there is nobody in your household who would accept to take the place of your young master in the netherworld, so I simply left." The old servant insisted, "Please come with me back to my house to talk over a solution." So he dragged the deist back home and reported to the concubines what the deist had told him. The concubines were very happy when they first heard that the deist had been found and had returned. However, when they then learned that one of them would need to die for their husband, they were resentful and fell into silence, each one looking at the other. The old servant then said resolutely, "You are all so young that it would be a great pity for any of you to die. But as for me, how can I regret dying when I am already so old?" He came out to see the deist and said, "Is it all right if I replace my master?" The deist replied, "It should be all right if you have neither regrets nor fear." After the servant's firm decision, the deist advised him, "Well, you have sincere and strong determination, so you should go and make your farewells to all your relatives and friends. Wait for me to prepare the magic, which should be ready in 3 days, and the effects should appear within 7 days." The old servant then arranged a room for the deist, where he served him reverently day and night. In between, the servant went to his loved ones' homes and told them what had happened. He cried and bid them farewell. Among his friends and relatives, there were those who laughed at his stupidity, those who respected him for his loyalty, those who pitied him, and yet others who ridiculed him or simply did not believe him. Once the old servant passed by the temple of Guandi, of whom he had always been a believer, and went in to pay his respects. He prayed, "I would die for my master and I beseech you, O Guandi, to assist the deist in returning my master's soul to his home." After he finished his prayer, a barefoot monk standing at the base of the altar shouted to him, "It is written all over your face that you have the aura of an evil spirit hanging over you. A disaster is coming to you. But I can save you if carefully keep this a secret." He then presented the servant with a small packet and said, "When the time comes, open this packet." After saying that, he disappeared. The old servant went back home and opened the packet in secret. Inside there were 5 fingernails and a strip of rope. He then slipped the packet in against his bosom. Soon 3 days passed and the deist asked someone to move the old servant's bed into the room where his master's coffin was placed, the bed facing the coffin. Then the deist securely locked the room and dug a hole into the wall to give food and water to the old servant inside. Then the deist erected an altar near the concubine's quarters and chanted the conjuration. As nothing happened for some time, the old servant started to doubt that anything would happen at all. But, just as he was thinking this, he heard wind gusting up from under the bed. 2 dark men appeared from the floorboards. They had greenish eyes which were set deep in their faces, and their bodies were completely covered in short hair. They were about 2 feet tall and their heads were as large as wheels. They stared at him, then slowly moved towards the coffin while looking around. Then they gnashed a hole in the coffin. As the hole grew larger, the servant could hear the sound of coughing coming from inside. It sounded like the young master. Then, the 2 demons opened the front lid of the coffin and helped the young master out. He was very weak and ill, as if he was barely hanging on. The 2 demons began to massage his abdomen and eventually a sound was issued from his lips. The old servant looked carefully at him. His external appearance was that of the young master, but the voice was that of the deist. He felt distressed. Guandi's words were true. He then quickly drew the package from his chest pocket and as soon as he opened it, 5 fingernails flew out in the form of a golden dragon several dozen feet long. The dragon grasped the old servant and flew through the air with him, carrying him to the roof beams, where he was bound. Although he was very confused, the servant looked down and noticed that the 2 demons were helping his master walk towards the bed. But when they found no one there, the master shouted out, "My magic has failed." Then the 2 demons became ferocious and angrily looked around the room for the servant, but without success. The master flew into a rage, shredding the servant's bedding and all his bed curtains. At this, one of the demons looked up and noticed the servant tied to the roof beam. Delighted, he jumped up along with the master, trying to pull him down. Before they could reach the spot, a tremendous peal of thunder was heard. The old man fell to the floor, the coffin closed up, and the demons vanished in an instant. Upon hearing the thunder, the concubines came and opened the door to see what had happened. The servant told them everything he had witnessed, and they hurried to see what had become of the deist. On the altar lay the corpse of the deist, who had been struck by lightning. On his body were 17 big characters written in sulfurous dust, using evil magic powers to satisfy one's greed and lust by using others' bodies. The sentence has been dealt according to the rules of heaven. Ghosts had been frequently seen in a house outside the north gate of Hangzhou. Nobody dared to live there and the house was securely boarded up. A scholar by the name of K wanted to buy the house. The locals told him of the dangers associated with the house, warning him he would be risking his life. But K did not listen to them and went ahead with the signing of the contract. His relatives refused to move there with him. K opened the house himself, lit a candle and sat in the room. At midnight a woman with a red sash dangling from her neck slowly entered the room. She knelt to the ground and paid respects to K. Then she tied a rope to the roof beam and pulled the noose over her head. K did not display any fear. Then she tied another rope and invited K to join her. K, however, drew the noose over his foot. The woman protested that he had made a mistake. K then laughed. "You're the one who was wrong in the past and that's why you have ended up where you are today. I'm certainly not wrong." At this, the ghost burst into tears and fell to her knees. She bowed to K several times and left. From then on, nothing strange went on in the house. K passed the imperial examination too. Someone has suggested that this scholar K might be the local officer K Binghao. There were 2 scholars from Nanchang County in the Jiangnan region who studied in the Bilan Temple. One was old and one was young. They got along well with each other. The old scholar went back to his hometown one day and died suddenly. The young one, unaware of his death, kept on studying at the temple as usual. At the end of the day, the young man fell asleep. He saw the old scholar push the door open and come in. He climbed onto the young man's bed and stroked his back, saying, "I had only been apart from you for a mere 10 days when I unexpectedly died of a sudden illness. Now I am a ghost, but as it is hard for me to give up our friendship so abruptly, I have come especially to bid farewell to you." The young man was so frightened that he was unable to speak. The dead man consoled him and said, "If I was going to do you harm, why would I speak to you so frankly? My brother, do not fear. The reason I have come here is because I want to entrust my posthumous responsibilities to you." The young man, slightly more collected, asked what duties he wished to hand over. The old man said, "I have an old mother over 70 years old and my wife is not yet 30. Several hus of rice a year would be enough for them to get by. I hope you can help them. This is the first thing. Also, I have some unpublished articles which I hope you can publish so that my modest fame will not completely vanish. This is the second thing. And I owed the brush seller several thousand coins but haven't repaid him, so I hope you can repay him for me. That is the third thing." The young man expressed his assent. The old man stood up and said, "Since you agree to undertake these duties, I will leave now." After this, he made to leave. Because his words seemed soundly based on human emotions and he looked just the same as always, the young man's fear gradually dissipated. He cried and asked the old man to stay for a while, saying, "Since we are parting forever, why not leave a little later?" The dead man cried too and came back to sit on the bed, talking with the young man about his previous life. After a bit, he stood up again and said, "I am leaving now." However, he stood there without moving forward, staring wide-eyed. His features grew ugly and slowly began to decay. The young man became frightened and urged him, "Since you have finished speaking, please go now." The body didn't move. The young man beat the bed and cried out, but the body still didn't leave and simply kept standing there. Much more frightened now, the young man got up and rushed out. The corpse rushed out after him. The faster the young man ran, the faster the corpse ran. The corpse followed the young man for several miles until at last the latter climbed over a wall and collapsed on the ground. The corpse couldn't climb over, so he simply leaned his head over the top of the wall. Saliva poured from his mouth, dripping continually onto the young man's face. In the morning, passers-by walked past and fed the unconscious young man ginger juice. He then regained consciousness. At that time, the dead man's family was looking for the corpse and couldn't find it anywhere. When they heard the news that it was on the wall, they came and carried the corpse back. Someone who knows of such matters said, "The heavenly soul of man is virtuous while his earthly soul is evil. The former is intelligent while the latter is obtuse." When the dead man first came, his intelligence was still intact, so the earthly soul could be attached to the heavenly soul and move together. When the heavenly soul left and his worry was resolved, the heavenly soul dissolved while the earthly soul remained. As long as the heavenly soul stayed, he kept his human personality, but when it left, he lost his human personality. The corpses and shadows we see moving around in this world are all earthly souls, and only men of the way can control their earthly souls. During the reign of Kangxi, a man named Zheng Suzhu said he was a native of Rongchang County in Sichuan. He wandered about the regions of Zhejiang and Hubei pretending to be mad. What he said often came true. Wherever he arrived, people young and old, men and women alike, all followed him all round. Suzhu laughed merrily or cursed angrily, but what he said always concerned people's private and secret lives. Sometimes when he talked kindly to someone, they would burst into tears and leave. Sometimes when he beat and cursed someone, they would be overjoyed at his words. The only one who could understand the meaning of Suzhu's words was the person who had asked him for help. To everyone else they made no sense. Mr. Wang Zijian of Hangzhou was once the magistrate of Luxi County. When he was dismissed from office, someone said it might be because of the inauspicious geomantic omen of his ancestral graves. Zijian wanted to move the graves somewhere else, but their final resting place had not yet been decided. At that time he heard that Suzhu had come running to ask for his advice. Suzhu happened to be climbing up the high hill with a stick in his hand, surrounded by a crowd of people. Zijian was thus unable to move past them. Suzhu saw Zijian among the people and in the distance whacked his stick as if beating him, scolding him, "Don't come here! Don't come here! The reason you have come here is only because you want to know whether it is good or not to move your ancestors' bodies elsewhere, and it is the same thing that ghouls do to dig up and steal corpses and bones. You can't do such a thing. You can't." Alarmed, Zijian turned back. Later, Wangsuan, Zijian's son, was promoted to censor. Xiao Yufang, the candidate who passed the imperial examination in the same year as me, at a young age studied under the teachings of a scholar named Zhong. Mr. Zhong, a native of Hunan, was upright and discreet in speech and manner. He and Yufang slept in one room. Once in the middle of the night, the scholar woke up suddenly and began to cry, saying he was going to die. Yufang asked him what had made him say that. He replied, "I dreamed that two clerks emerged from the underworld and came up to my bed, dragging me down with them. The road was endless and vast, and there was nothing but yellow sand and white grass. After walking several miles, they guided me to a government office in which there was a god with a black gauze cap sitting facing south. The clerk helped me kneel down in the hall, and the god said, 'Do you know that you have committed crimes?' I answered no. The god asked me to try and think about it. I thought it over and said, 'Yes, I have done wrong. I am not filial because 20 years after my parents' death, I still have them in their coffins and am unable to bury them. My crime deserves death 10,000 times over.' The god said, 'This crime is trivial.' I then said, 'Once in my youth I seduced a servant girl, and I have been improperly intimate with 2 prostitutes.' The god said, 'This crime is trivial.' I said, 'I have wronged others with my speech because I have enjoyed mocking other scholars' articles.' The god said, 'This crime is even more trivial.' I said, 'Then I have no other crimes.' The god looked around at his understrappers and said, 'Make him look into the mirror to have a look at himself.' The understrappers brought a basin of water and had me look into the water. Then in a stupor, I realized at once that in my previous life my name was Yang Chang, and I once went to Hunan with a friend to do some business. I coveted my friend's property and killed him by pushing him into the river. I couldn't help shivering recalling this, and then knelt down before the god, saying I knew I had done wrong. The god said in a stern voice, 'Why haven't you changed?' He raised his hand and slammed it down on the table. With a loud clap, heaven fell and the earth cracked. Everything, cities, government offices, machinery, gods, and ghosts disappeared, and all I could see was a vast body of water without bounds or shores. I was alone in the mist, floating on a vegetable leaf. I wondered how it was that I could stay afloat since I was heavy while the leaf was so light. However, when I looked at myself, I had already transformed into a maggot whose ears, eyes, mouth, and nose were all as tiny as mustard seeds. I couldn't help wailing, and then I woke up. If I had a dream like this, how can I have much longer to live?" Yufang consoled him and said, "Don't be anguished, sir. Dreams can't be taken as fact." But Zhong had his coffin and grave's clothes immediately prepared. 3 days later, Zhong spat blood and died suddenly.